Kill me quickly, the alien girl begged. Every bone broken, then he pulled the blanket back and froze. The wind screamed across the empty mining world called Dravos 4, carrying the smell of burned metal and ash. The war had ended here 2 days ago, but the planet still felt alive with pain. Every crater whispered of something broken and machines. Soldiers, dreams. And in the middle of that silence walked Rylan, a human medic with tired eyes and a dirty uniform. He had seen enough death to fill a lifetime. Yet still, the universe demanded more from him. Rylan moved through the wreckage slowly, his boots sinking into soft black dust. The wrecks of ships surrounded him, twisted, broken, silent. His scanner beeped weakly every few steps, detecting faint life signs that always turned out to be dying circuits or small animals. He told himself he didn't care anymore, that nothing human or alien mattered to him now. But when the scanner blinked again, not yellow, not red but green, something inside him stirred. He frowned, kneeling near a collapsed bunker half buried in rubble. The reading was weak, almost gone but still alive. He began digging, hands numb inside cracked gloves. Each piece of metal he moved revealed more of something soft beneath. At first he thought it was a body, another corpse for the record. Then he saw movement, a faint trembling under the gray thermal blanket. Rylan froze. Someone was still alive down here. He reached forward, pulling the edge of the blanket aside, and what he saw made his breath catch. It wasn't human, not completely. The body beneath was small, almost fragile, skin pale like glass with a soft blue glow under the surface. Her hair was silver-white, tangled with dirt and blood. Her bones, Rylan could see them bent and twisted at wrong angles under the skin. Every bone in her body looked broken. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly in the dim light. When she spoke, her voice was weak, trembling. "Kill me quickly," she whispered. The words were in standard, broken, heavy with pain. "Please, kill me." Rylan froze completely, staring at her face. She was young, maybe 16 by human standards. Too young to sound that hopeless. He pressed his fingers to her neck. Checking for a pulse, it was there, faint. Fragile, but fighting. "You're alive," he muttered under his breath. Her lips trembled again, her voice almost gone. "Don't. Help me. They'll come back." Rylan shook his head, not understanding. "Who will come back?" he asked, but she had already slipped into unconsciousness. He looked around, nothing moved. No sound except the wind, whoever they were. He didn't want to meet them still. He couldn't leave her here, the medic in him. The human in him refused. He pulled off his old field jacket and wrapped it around her trembling body. Her skin felt cold, unnaturally cold, like touching ice, but when he lifted her, she clung weakly to his sleeve, even unconscious. She didn't want to be left alone. Rylan carried her back through the wreckage toward his temporary camp. Each step was slow and heavy, his arms burning from the effort. The blanket around her kept slipping, revealing strange markings on her skin. They looked like burns at first, but too symmetrical, like symbols burned into her flesh by machines. "What the hell did they do to you?" he muttered, tightening his grip. By the time he reached the small medical shelter, his heart was pounding. He laid her gently on the only clean surface left, a portable medbed powered by a flickering battery. He scanned her body, eyes narrowing as data filled the screen. Her bone density wasn't natural. Her cellular structure was mixed. Part human, part something else. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't an enemy. She was something no one was supposed to find. Half human, half alien, Rylan whispered. The scanner flashed red for a moment, warning of genetic instability. Then it showed something stranger, energy signatures moving inside her body like small waves of light. She was alive because something inside her refused to die. Rylan sighed, rubbing the dirt from his face. He didn't know what to do if he reported her. Command would take her away, dissect her, erase her. If he didn't, he'd be accused of harboring enemy assets. Either way, it meant death. He looked down at the girl again, her breathing shallow, her skin glowing faintly under the medlight. She looked peaceful now, almost like sleeping. But even in that stillness, her body told a story of pain no creature should endure. He sat beside the bed, listening to the quiet hum of the machines. Outside, thunder rolled across the dead horizon. The air smelled like rust and ozone. Rylan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "This is insane," he said softly. But his eyes kept drifting back to her. The way her fingers twitched when the wind outside howled. The way her breathing steadied when he touched her wrist to check her pulse. Something inside him, something buried deep beneath years of loss, started to wake up. He remembered the faces of the wounded soldiers he couldn't save, the children he saw after bombings. And now this girl, half alien, half mystery, lying broken before him. He didn't even know her name. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. Not again, not this time. He stood up slowly, checking the door locks and dimming the lights. His heart beat faster than he wanted to admit as he turned back toward her. He saw her eyes open again, faint light glowing inside them like distant stars. Her lips moved silently, forming words he couldn't understand, and for a moment, the medical scanner flickered, her heartbeat rising, her neural signals spiking. Then just as suddenly, everything went still again. Rylan stepped closer, not realizing he was holding his breath. The girl was staring at him, her voice faint but clear. "You... human?" He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said softly. She blinked, her glowing eyes softening. "Then, don't tell them," she whispered. Before her eyes closed again, the room fell silent. And in that silence, Rylan Harrow realized he had just stepped into something far bigger than war. He had found something the galaxy wanted buried, and now it was in his hands. The night outside grew darker, the wind colder, and far above the ruins of Dravos 4, unseen satellites shifted their gaze toward one small life sign that shouldn't have existed. The storm hit the camp before dawn. Lightning flashed across the gray sky, throwing shadows against the torn canvas walls. Rylan hadn't slept, not even for a minute. He sat beside the strange girl, watching the soft blue light that pulsed under her skin like waves beneath ice. Every time she breathed, the air around her seemed to shimmer. It wasn't natural and it wasn't medical. It was something else entirely, something that didn't belong to this world. He rubbed his tired eyes, thinking of his report tablet on the desk. He should have sent a distress call hours ago. Protocol demanded it. Any life form found after battle must be logged, scanned, and surrendered. But every time his finger hovered over the transmitter button, he hesitated, because he could still hear her broken voice in his mind. "Kill me quickly." He didn't know why those words haunted him so much. Maybe because they sounded too human, too familiar. The wind rattled the walls again, and the lights flickered. He sighed and checked her vitals. Heart rate steady, oxygen normal, temperature low but stable. Her bones were knitting faster than expected. The scanner said full recovery was impossible without surgery. Yet every hour, she looked less like a dying patient and more like someone fighting her way back. It made no sense. Human medicine couldn't do that. Rylan stood, stretching his stiff back. He walked to the small heater, poured hot water into a metal cup, and stared at his reflection. Dark circles under his eyes. Dirt streaked across his jaw. He barely recognized himself anymore. Once he'd been a combat medic for the Earth fleet. Now he was just a man hiding on a forgotten world, patching up the wounded ghosts of a war no one wanted to remember. And yet this girl, she didn't feel like another casualty. She felt like the start of something or the end. The sound of movement made him turn. Her eyes were open again, faintly glowing in the dark. She tried to sit up, but pain twisted her face. Rylan rushed forward, steadying her shoulders. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're safe." "Don't move too fast," she looked at him. Confused, her voice came in broken standard, slow and uncertain. "Safe, here," he nodded. "For now." She stared at her hands as if seeing them for the first time, then she touched the bandages on her arms. "Why? You help?" she asked softly. Rylan didn't know how to answer. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Because you were dying," he said finally. "That's reason enough." Her lips trembled, not from fear, but from something close to disbelief. "No one helped before," she whispered. He didn't reply. Instead, he reached for the scanner and ran another check. The readings jumped erratically, something pulsing deep inside her body. He frowned. "What are they?" She shook her head weakly. "Not they," she said, tapping her chest. He leaned closer, trying to understand. "You mean something inside you?" She nodded once, eyes glimmering like liquid crystal. "Inside, all of me." The words made no sense, but her tone did. She was afraid of herself before Rylan could ask more. An alarm chirped on the wall console. He turned sharply. A red light blinked. Incoming transmission detected. Static filled the small shelter, followed by a cold mechanical voice. This is Search Unit Delta 7. Unauthorized life signs detected in Sector 12. All personnel report any survivors immediately. The signal repeated twice, then cut off. Ryland's blood went cold. They were searching. He turned to the girl. She was staring at him wide-eyed. Find me, she whispered, voice trembling. He nodded grimly. Yeah, they're coming for you. How? He hesitated, looking out through the narrow viewport. Search drones, small glowing orbs, were already scanning the ruins. He could see their beams slicing through the night. Moving closer to the camp, he had two choices: report her and save himself, or run and probably die. For a long moment he said nothing, his heart hammering in his chest. He remembered his commanding officer's words from years ago. Medics don't choose sides. They save lives. But this wasn't just about saving a life. This was about deciding which life mattered. He looked back at her, small and trembling, clutching his jacket like a shield, and he made his decision. Get up, he said, grabbing his gear. Her eyes widened. Where go? Somewhere they can't find you. She tried to stand, pain lancing through her body. Ryland caught her before she fell, her cold skin brushing his hand. It felt like ice burning through his veins. He pulled the thermal blanket tight around her. Can you walk? She shook her head weakly. He sighed, crouching in front of her. Then hold on. She hesitated, then wrapped her thin arms around his shoulders. He lifted her easily, too easily. She was light as air. The storm outside had grown worse. Rain hissed against the metal ruins as they slipped through the mud and darkness. Ryland moved quickly, avoiding the searchlights that cut through the smoke every few seconds. He heard the distant hum of drones scanning for heat signatures. He ducked behind a half-buried cargo shell, heart pounding. The girl's breath was faint against his neck. Why help? She asked again, her words trembling in the wind. Ryland swallowed hard. Because I couldn't save the last one, he said quietly. And I'm not losing another. They stayed silent for a while after that. When the searchlights passed, Ryland made his move, darting toward an old tunnel entrance at the edge of the field. The passage led deep underground. Into an abandoned transport shaft, darkness swallowed them whole. He turned on his wrist light. The beam revealed rusted rails and broken machines stretching into the black. He laid her down gently on a dry patch of floor. She looked at him, eyes glimmering in the pale light. What name? She asked. Ryland, he said. She repeated it slowly, her accent soft and strange. Ryland, he smiled faintly. What about you? Her gaze drifted away for a moment, then she whispered, Lyra. It sounded like a song. He nodded. Okay, Lyra, you rest. I'll keep watch. But even as he said the words, he knew rest wouldn't come. He sat near the tunnel entrance, holding his plasma pistol, listening to the hum of machines far above. The sound of drones echoed faintly. They were still searching, still closing in. Behind him, Lyra stirred, whispering in her alien tongue. Her voice rose and fell like music, soft, trembling, beautiful. And for the first time, Ryland realized he didn't feel alone. He felt something he hadn't felt since before the war. Purpose. He looked back at her glowing face. Half hidden beneath the blanket, she looked fragile. But there was something inside her that radiated quiet strength, a light refusing to go out. He didn't know who she was or what she was, but he knew this. The people hunting her weren't rescuers. They were executioners, and if they wanted her, they'd have to go through him first. Ryland checked his weapon. Eyes narrowing as the storm thundered above, he whispered under his breath, Not tonight. In the flickering shadows, Lyra's eyes opened again, faint blue light reflecting off the tunnel walls. She looked at him and whispered almost to herself. You're not like other humans, Ryland smirked tiredly. That's what they keep telling me. Outside. The search drones passed overhead, unaware of what hid beneath the surface. The storm howled louder, covering every sound. And in that hidden darkness, a human medic and a half-alien girl began their fragile escape. Two broken lives bound by a single choice. A choice that would soon shake the quiet corners of the galaxy. Hours passed in silence. The storm had ended, but the air inside the tunnel still dripped with moisture. Water fell from the ceiling in slow drops that echoed through the metal shaft like a ticking clock. Ryland sat against the wall, his rifle across his lap, eyes half open but alert. He hadn't slept, not since finding her. Every few minutes he turned to check on Lyra. She lay wrapped in the blanket, breathing steady, the soft blue light under her skin pulsing faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. At first he thought it was just the light from his wrist lamp reflecting off her skin, but when he turned it off, the glow remained. Faint, steady, alive. He leaned closer, watching it move like liquid fire beneath her veins. No human could do that, not even genetically modified soldiers. He had seen those, enhanced Marines with metal bones and neural implants. They didn't glow like stars under their skin. Whatever she was different suddenly. Lyra's eyes opened. They caught the light, shimmering like glass soaked in moonlight. For a moment she looked disoriented, then afraid. Her hands clutched the blanket tightly as if expecting chains. "It's okay," Ryland said softly, raising his hands. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." She blinked, her gaze searching his face. "You still here?" she whispered slowly. He nodded. "I said I wouldn't leave." Her eyes softened, but she still looked uncertain. "Humans lie," she said, the words quiet but sharp. Ryland gave a tired smile. "Some do," he admitted. "I'm not one of them." Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then she said something strange. "Your eyes, not afraid." "I've seen worse," Ryland said, though deep inside he wasn't sure that was true. He hesitated, then added, "Lyra, I need to understand who you are. They're searching for you, and I can't protect you if I don't know why." She turned away, her expression darkening. "I don't want to remember," she whispered. Ryland frowned. "But you have to." Her hands trembled, her breath growing unsteady. "You think memory is small," she said, voice cracking. "But mine hurts like fire." Ryland said nothing. Waiting, he knew the look. He'd seen it in survivors. People who carried nightmares they couldn't put into words. Finally, Lyra spoke again. "I was born in a place without sky," she said softly. Her words came slow, careful, like each one was heavy. "Metal walls, white lights. Always cold. They called it Helion 9. Ryland felt his stomach twist. He'd heard that name before, whispered by soldiers who drank too much. Helion 9 wasn't a colony, it was a lab. A joint project between the Human Coalition and several alien governments. A place that officially didn't exist. A place for biological weapon advancement. The rumors said no one who went there ever came back. "They kept us in glass rooms," Lyra continued, her eyes distant. "Many like me. Some older, some younger. We were told we were the future." Ryland's grip tightened on his rifle. "What kind of future?" She looked at him, and for the first time, real anger burned behind her glowing eyes. "They wanted to end war by making monsters that could win any." The words hit Ryland harder than a bullet. He'd fought in those wars, against aliens, against his own kind, against whoever the generals pointed at next. And now here was the proof of what it had all cost. "They made you fight?" he asked quietly. Lyra shook her head. "No, they made us learn. Test. Hurt. When one of us broke, they built another." Her voice faltered. "I remember screams, the smell of burning, the sound of machines inside our heads." She touched her temple, wincing. Ryland could see faint metallic lines beneath her skin like circuitry. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "God, they turned you into living weapons." Lyra's lips trembled. "When I failed, they wanted to erase me," she said. "I ran. I thought I escaped, but they followed." Her breathing quickened, panic rising. "They hurt me again. They buried me underground. Said I was mistake. Said I must die." Ryland felt anger burning inside his chest. Not the wild kind that made men reckless, but the cold, heavy kind that made men dangerous. He clenched his fists, staring at the dark tunnel floor. "No one deserves that," he said. His voice low, Lyra watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. "You say that like it means something," she whispered. "It does," Ryland replied, meeting her gaze. "At least to me." For a long moment neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full, heavy alive. Then Lyra whispered, "Why you care?" Ryland exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because I've spent too long watching people die. Maybe because you remind me what being human is supposed to mean." Lyra tilted her head. "Confused. I'm not human," she said. Ryland smiled faintly. "You're more human than most people I've met." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Then a faint hum echoed through the tunnel, mechanical. Distant but growing louder, Rylan tensed. His hand tightening on his rifle, Lyra flinched, the blue glow under her skin brightening. "They find us," she whispered. "Not yet," Rylan said quickly, switching off his light. He crouched near the tunnel entrance, peering through a crack in the old metal hatch. Outside, 2 hover drones drifted past, their search beams slicing through the fog. Their sensors scanned the area, but after a few seconds they moved on. Rylan waited until the sound faded, then turned back to her. "They're getting closer. We have to move before daylight," Lyra nodded weakly. "But where go?" He looked toward the darkness stretching deeper into the shaft. "There's an old mining outpost 5 kilometers down. The scanners there might still work. Maybe we can jam their signal." Lyra hesitated, then touched his sleeve. "You not afraid to die?" Rylan gave a dry laugh. "Fear and I broke up years ago." She blinked, confused, and he smirked softly. "It means I'm used to danger," he explained. But inside he wasn't as calm as he sounded. He could feel the weight of what he'd just learned pressing on him. If Hellion 9 was still operating, it meant someone out there was building more like her. And if they wanted her dead, it meant she knew something dangerous. Something that could expose them. Rylan packed what little gear he had left. Checking his weapon one last time, then he turned to Lyra, who was watching him quietly. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, pushing herself up slowly, wincing as her legs trembled. "I can," she whispered. "I have to." Rylan offered her his hand, and she took it, her fingers cool and delicate. For a brief second, the light from her skin illuminated his face. It wasn't just strange, and it was beautiful. Almost holy, he looked away quickly. "Let's move," he said. His voice rough, she smiled faintly. "You pretend to be stone," she whispered. "What?" "But inside?" "You are fire," he didn't answer. Just turned and started walking behind them. The tunnel stretched into darkness ahead. The faint glow of emergency lights flickered weakly, leading deeper underground somewhere far above. The sky was already waking, and the hunters were preparing to search again. Neither of them knew how far the truth went. But as they disappeared into the deep tunnels of Dravos 4, one thing was certain. The secret of Helion 9 would not stay buried forever, and soon, the universe would learn that one broken girl and one stubborn human were enough to challenge everything. The tunnels of Dravos 4 grew narrower the deeper they went. Every step echoed like a whisper through metal ribs and hollow pipes. Rylan led the way with a dim wrist light, the beam trembling as his hand shook from exhaustion. Lyra followed close behind, one hand brushing the wall for balance, her pale skin casting a faint blue glow that lit the darkness around them. The air smelled of rust and burnt oil. Somewhere above them, engines hummed, faint but growing closer. They had been walking for hours, moving through old transport shafts that hadn't seen life in decades. Rylan's boots slipped on wet rails, and once he almost fell before Lyra caught his arm. Her grip surprised him, strong for someone so fragile. "Careful," she whispered. Her accent soft, almost melodic. Rylan gave a tired smile. "Guess I'm the one who needs saving now." Lyra tilted her head, not understanding the joke, but the small smile that crossed her face warmed the cold air. When they finally reached a wider chamber, Rylan paused to rest. It was an old cargo bay, empty crates stacked like silent tombstones, dust covering everything. He set his pack down, checked the scanner, and frowned. "The storm's cleared. That means the drones can pick up ground movement again," he said. Lyra looked at the ceiling as if she could hear them. "They're searching," she murmured. "I can feel them." Her eyes glowed faintly brighter, and for a moment, Rylan thought he saw a pulse of light ripple through the walls themselves. Then it was gone. He stared at her. "What did you just do?" Lyra blinked, confused. "Nothing, just..." Listened before he could question her. A low mechanical hum rolled through the air. He froze. The sound wasn't from her. It was from above. He killed the wrist light instantly. A bright beam sliced through the metal ceiling, scanning the room like a blade of white fire. "Drones," he hissed, pulling Lyra behind a crate. The beam swept past them, stopped, then reversed. They'd been detected. "Run," he shouted, grabbing her hand. They sprinted across the cargo bay as a volley of plasma bolts rained down, exploding against the floor. The heat seared Rylan's back as they dove into a maintenance corridor. Behind them, the drone's metallic voices echoed. "Target located. Termination authorized. The air filled with the shriek of engines and the smell of ozone. Ryland fired over his shoulder, one shot striking a drone square in its lens. It burst in a flash of sparks, but two more swooped in to take its place. "Keep moving," he yelled. Lyra's breathing grew ragged. Her steps uneven, but she didn't slow. They burst into another tunnel, this one lined with pipes and broken cables. A dead end loomed ahead. Ryland cursed under his breath, turning in circles, searching for any way out. Then he saw it. A vertical shaft half hidden behind a pile of debris. "Up there," he said, motioning to the shaft. Lyra stared at it, her expression uncertain. Too high. Ryland didn't hesitate. He crouched and laced his fingers together. "Step on my hands," he said. "I'll lift you." She hesitated for only a moment before obeying. He grunted as she climbed, pushing her upward until she could grab the edge. "Go!" he shouted. "I'll follow." The drones rounded the corner. Their guns glowing red, Ryland fired again, hitting one in the wing, sending it spinning into the wall. He jumped for the edge of the shaft, his fingers scraping metal. Lyra reached down, her small hand glowing brighter. When she touched his wrist, a jolt of energy shot through him. Not pain, but pure strength. He pulled himself up in one desperate motion, collapsing beside her as plasma fire scorched the opening below. They crawled through the shaft, panting, the air hot and heavy with smoke. When they finally stopped, Ryland turned to her. "What did you just do back there?" he asked between breaths. Lyra shook her head, frightened. "I don't know. It happens when I'm scared," he frowned. "Energy transfer? That's not normal, even for hybrids." She wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, "They built me to connect. To amplify." "Amplify what?" "Everything," she said softly. "Fear, pain, power." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He wanted to believe she was just another victim of war, but the more he saw, the more he realized she might be something the galaxy had never seen before, and something the people hunting her could never allow to live. They reached the end of the shaft. A sealed hatch rusted shut. Ryland tried to force it open, but it didn't budge. He kicked it. Grunting in frustration, Lyra watched silently, then placed her palm flat against the lock. A faint hum filled the air, and light flowed from her hand into the metal. The hatch clicked and swung open with a hiss of steam. Ryland stared, speechless. "You're full of surprises," he said. Lyra gave a small, tired smile. "You say that every time." The hatch opened into an enormous underground chamber, a forgotten mining station. Broken screens flickered weakly, and the air smelled of dust and burnt circuits. Ryland walked to the control console, brushing away cobwebs. He powered it on using an auxiliary cell from his pack. The screens lit up with static, then a map, the old mining grid of Dravos 4. "There," he said, pointing to a blinking icon. "That's the comm tower. Maybe still active." Lyra frowned. "You call for help?" He hesitated. "Not for them," he said. "For us." He began typing commands, trying to access the old relay frequency, but the screen flashed red. "Network restricted. Access denied." "Damn it," he muttered. Then a soft chime and an incoming signal. Lyra stepped closer. "What is that?" Ryland's eyes widened as a familiar voice crackled through the static. "Field Medic Ryland Harrow, you are in violation of Coalition Regulation 19A. Surrender the specimen immediately, and you will not be harmed." It was his old commanding officer. "Captain Reese." Lyra flinched at the word specimen. Ryland slammed his fist on the console. "She's not a specimen," he shouted. The voice continued calmly. "Helion 9 property must be recovered. You have until dawn." The transmission ended. Ryland stared at the blank screen, rage boiling in his chest. "They know exactly where we are," he said quietly. Lyra touched his shoulder, her voice trembling. "You helped me. Now they come for you." He turned to her, meeting her glowing eyes. "Then they'll find out what happens when humans stop running." Outside, the hum of engines grew louder. He could hear the distant thud of troop carriers landing on the surface. Searchlights began to sweep across the entrance of the mine. They didn't have much time. Ryland grabbed his gear and checked the pulse pistol. "We need to move to the lower tunnels." "They'll come from above," Lyra nodded, following him as they descended into the dark once more. Minutes later, a small explosion shook the ground. The soldiers had breached the upper level. Dust rained from the ceiling as Ryland guided Lyra through the maintenance ducts. He could hear voices echoing, human and mechanical. "Eyes open. Hybrid confirmed in Sector 4. Lyra stumbled, clutching her head. They're close, she whispered. I can feel them thinking. Rylan stopped, staring at her. You can read minds? Not read, she said, hear noise. Too many voices. Her glow brightened again and Rylan grabbed her hand. Stay with me, he said firmly. Block it out. Focus on my voice, she nodded, breathing hard. The sound of footsteps drew closer. Rylan pressed her against the wall. Both of them hidden in the shadows. 3 soldiers passed, helmets glowing with scanner lights, weapons ready. When they were gone, Rylan exhaled slowly. Lyra whispered, They won't stop. He nodded grimly. Neither will I. They crept deeper into the tunnels until the noise faded behind them. Rylan finally stopped in a narrow chamber lined with old power cores. He placed his hands on his knees, catching his breath. Lyra looked at him, eyes full of quiet fear. Rylan, she said softly, you can still leave. They only want me. He looked up at her, sweat dripping down his face. Not a chance, he said. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Then we fight, she whispered. A distant explosion echoed from above, shaking the floor. Rylan nodded, gripping his weapon tighter. Yeah, he said. We fight. And far above them the hunters spread out across the ruins of Dravos 4. Searchlights pierced the clouds, illuminating the storm-scarred land. The hunt had truly begun, and neither side would leave this world unchanged. The tunnels had grown cold again. The kind of cold that seeps through metal and bone until even breathing feels heavy. Hours had passed since the soldiers stormed the upper levels. Rylan and Lyra had found temporary shelter inside an old power station buried beneath the mine. Flickering orange light from the broken generator cast moving shadows on the walls. The air smelled of old oil, dust, and static, but down here, at least for a moment, they were invisible. Rylan sat on the floor beside a small heat lamp, cleaning his weapon with tired hands. Every sound echoed, the metallic click of parts, the low hum of energy pulsing through the walls. Lyra sat opposite him, wrapped in his jacket, watching him silently. Her blue glow had dimmed, softer now, more human than alien. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, thoughtful. 2 souls trying to understand the space between fear and trust. You're quiet, Rylan said, not looking up from his rifle. Lyra's eyes followed the motion of his hands. You don't ask questions anymore, she said softly. He smiled faintly. I'm learning when not to. She tilted her head. Humans always want to know. Always ask. Why stop now? Because sometimes answers hurt more than silence, he said, snapping the weapon shut. Lyra thought about that, her gaze drifting to the generator light. Pain is strange, she whispered. Your kind fears it. My kind was made from it. Rylan looked up. What do you mean? Lyra hesitated. When they created us in Helion 9, they said pain is proof of growth, she said, her voice almost trembling. They studied how we reacted, how long we could scream before the mind broke, they said. They were building peace through endurance. Rylan's stomach tightened. He couldn't find words, only a quiet anger that burned low and deep. Lyra's eyes shimmered like water. You look angry, she said quietly. I am, he admitted, not at you. At them. At us. At the kind of people who think pain is a tool. Lyra studied him, curious. But you use pain too. He blinked, surprised. What? You fight wars. You make weapons. You kill to survive. Pain is part of your story too. Her tone wasn't judgment, it was sadness, like she pitied him. Rylan sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. Yeah, he said. We do. But sometimes, we try to fix what we break. Lyra tilted her head. And do you fix me? Rylan met her eyes, the question hitting deeper than he expected. I don't know if I can, he said softly, but I'll try. The silence stretched between them again. Then Lyra moved closer to the lamp, her face glowing faintly in the light. She extended her hand toward the small flame, curious. Fire, she whispered. It's alive, Rylan nodded. Yeah, dangerous. But beautiful too, she smiled faintly. Like you? He blinked, caught off guard. What? Humans, she said. You burn so easily. But you also give warmth. For a moment, they both laughed softly, the sound strange in the cold. Forgotten chamber. It didn't last long. A distant thud echoed through the tunnels. The laughter faded instantly, replaced by sharp alertness. Rylan grabbed his rifle, switching off the lamp. Sounded close, he whispered. Lyra's glow brightened unconsciously. fear flickering under her skin. "Lights off," Rylan hissed, touching her arm. "They'll see us." She nodded quickly. Closing her eyes, the glow faded until only the faint shimmer of her eyes remained. They waited in silence, listening. Footsteps echoed faintly, measured, heavy. Then a low metallic voice filled the tunnel. "Sector clear. Move to lower junction. Target may have gone subterranean." The soldiers were close. Rylan motioned to Lyra. "Stay quiet, stay low." The footsteps passed above, faint vibrations shaking dust loose from the ceiling. When the noise finally faded, Lyra let out a trembling breath. "They never stop," she whispered. Rylan nodded. "No, they don't." She looked at him, her eyes glimmering softly. "But neither do you." He smirked. "You noticed." Minutes turned into an hour. When the sounds finally vanished, Rylan relaxed slightly. He set his weapon aside and leaned against the wall. Exhaustion began to win. Lyra shifted closer, her head tilting curiously. "You look tired," she said. "I am," he replied. "But I can't sleep." "Why?" He smiled weakly. "Because if I close my eyes, I might wake up and find this was all a dream. That I never found you." Her lips parted slightly as if the words surprised her. "Why, does it matter?" she asked. "Because finding you means maybe all the terrible things I've done weren't for nothing." She didn't understand all the words, but she understood his tone. Her hand reached out hesitantly, touching his arm. It was a small gesture, but her touch felt like electricity running through his veins. Warm meeting cold, human meeting something beyond human. "Rylan," she whispered, "when I close my eyes I see light. Not from sun, but from machines. I hear voices, commands, I feel pain." Her voice broke slightly. "But when I hear your voice, it stops." Rylan stared at her, unsure what to say. Lyra continued. "You make it quiet inside my head. That has never happened before." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking deep. "Then I'll keep talking," he said softly. Her lips curved into a small, fragile smile. They sat in silence for a long time, their shoulders almost touching. The heat lamp flickered faintly. Casting orange light across her face, she looked peaceful for once. No fear, no trembling, just calm, but that peace didn't last. The console on the far wall beeped suddenly. A soft, rhythmic pulse. Rylan frowned, standing quickly. "What's that?" Lyra followed him, her glow returning faintly. He checked the small terminal. The old system was still partially functional on the cracked display. A single message blinked. "Incoming signal, encrypted frequency, HN09. Rylan's blood ran cold. "Helion 9, he whispered. The screen flickered again, then a voice filled the room. Smooth, confident, and cruel. "Subject Seraph 01. You cannot hide forever." Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat. The voice continued. "Your creation was not a mistake, my dear. It was a masterpiece, and the human who shelters you will make an excellent study subject as well." Rylan slammed the console with his fist. Cutting the signal, Lyra's hands were shaking, her glow pulsing erratically. "They found us," she whispered. Rylan grabbed his pack. "Then we move now." But before they could leave, a deep rumble shook the floor. The tunnel lights flickered red. A deafening roar echoed from somewhere above. An explosion. Dust rained from the ceiling. Rylan grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her toward the exit behind them. The power station trembled like a beast waking from sleep. Metal cracked. Pipes burst. Flames spilled through the vents. They ran, their shadows stretching long in the flickering light. Lyra cried as a section of ceiling collapsed between them. The shockwave threw her backward. Rylan turned, coughing through smoke. "Lyra!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the chaos. He saw her on the other side, pinned under fallen debris, her glow flickering weakly. He rushed toward her. But the heat was unbearable. Flames licked the walls. Sparks rained down. "Don't move!" he yelled. Lyra's voice trembled. "Leave me!" "Not a chance," he shouted back. He pushed against the wreckage, grunting, muscles straining. The metal refused to move. Then Lyra looked up, her glowing eyes full of fear, but also determination. "Rylan," she said softly, "step back." "What?" "Please," she whispered. "Trust me." He hesitated, then obeyed, stepping away. Lyra placed both hands on the wreckage. Her eyes blazed bright, brighter than he'd ever seen. The entire tunnel filled with light. Metal bent like clay, the air hummed with raw power. Then were silence when the glow faded, The debris was gone, vaporized. Lyra collapsed forward. Smoke rising from her palms, Rylan rushed to her, catching her before she hit the ground. Her voice was faint, trembling. "I didn't mean to." He shook his head. Holding her close, "You saved us," he whispered. You don't have to be afraid of that, but even as he said the words, he knew the truth. Whatever Helion 9 had done to her wasn't finished. Her power was growing, changing, and the people hunting her would stop at nothing to control it. Outside, through the cracks in the tunnel roof, Rylan could see lights in the sky, ships descending. The next phase of the hunt had begun, and this time, they weren't just chasing a runaway experiment. They were chasing a weapon that could change the balance of the galaxy. Rylan tightened his grip on Lyra. "Stay with me," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, faintly glowing. "I'm here," she murmured. He looked at the fire still burning in the wreckage and then at her face. Her light reflected in his eyes, and for the first time, he realized she wasn't the weapon they feared. She was the proof of something far greater, something Helion 9 could never understand: hope. Smoke hung heavy in the tunnels. The air shimmered with heat as bits of fire still clung to the broken walls. Rylan coughed hard, lungs burning, dragging Lyra through the narrow passage that led away from the collapsed chamber. Every muscle in his body screamed, but he didn't stop. Behind them, the sound of falling metal and distant shouts echoed through the mine. The hunters were back on their trail. He laid Lyra down against a wall where the air felt cooler. Her skin still glowed faintly, light trembling beneath the surface like trapped lightning. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale shaky and uneven. "Hey," Rylan said softly, brushing dust from her face. "You still with me?" Her eyes flickered open, unfocused at first, then locking on him. "I didn't mean to break everything," she whispered, voice weak. "You saved us," he said, his voice steady but gentle. "That's all that matters." Lyra tried to move, but her body shook violently. Her hands twitched, small sparks of blue energy flickering between her fingers. "It hurts," she gasped, clutching her chest. "Inside it burns." Rylan looked around desperately. The portable med kit lay half-crushed from the explosion, but he dug through it anyway. He found a stim dose and pressed it to her neck. The injector hissed, but the scanner blinked red, no effect. Her pulse spiked, energy readings climbing beyond human range. Rylan could feel the static building in the air, making his hair stand on end. "Lyra," he said quickly, grabbing her shoulders. "Listen to me, breathe. Focus on my voice." Her eyes snapped open, glowing like twin stars. "I can't stop it," she cried. "It's too much." The walls began to vibrate, dust falling like rain. Rylan pulled her close, holding her as the light around her grew blinding. "I'm here," he whispered. "You're not alone. You hear me? You're not a weapon." And then, as suddenly as it had started, the light exploded outward. The tunnel filled with a roaring shockwave that swept through every corridor. Metal buckled, flames died, and the air turned still. When Rylan opened his eyes, the world glowed faintly blue. Everything around them, pipes, walls, even the dust in the air, was frozen in motion. He looked down and realized Lyra's power had stopped time itself. She floated inches above the floor, eyes closed, her hair drifting weightlessly around her. For a moment, Rylan forgot to breathe. The scene looked impossible, beautiful and terrifying at once. Then the glow dimmed, the sound rushed back, and Lyra collapsed into his arms. Time resumed with a thunderous echo. Rylan caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin felt cold again, the glow fading into silence. He held her tightly, heart pounding. "What did you do?" he whispered. Her lips moved, barely a sound. "Stopped them," she murmured. For a heartbeat, "I stopped everything." Rylan looked toward the end of the tunnel. The hunters had frozen mid-step, caught in the blast. Suspended for seconds, but they were already stirring again. He knew they wouldn't stay down for long. He pulled Lyra onto his back and began to run. Each corridor looked the same, twisting deeper underground until the faint sound of machinery guided him. Finally, the tunnel opened into a wide cavern filled with rusted mining crawlers and cranes. Old banners still hung from the ceiling, torn and faded. Dravos Mining Guild. "We dig the future." Rylan almost laughed at the irony. He set Lyra down near a wall and checked the perimeter. The scanners above the door blinked red. Motion detected. "They're coming," he muttered. "We're out of time." Lyra stirred, opening her eyes. "Leave me," she said weakly. "Not happening." Rylan replied, grabbing an old fuel cell and connecting it to his rifle's power pack. You said they wanted you alive, right? She nodded slowly. Yes, but they don't care if you die. Rylan smirked. Then we make that mistake cost them. He crouched beside her, his voice low. Lyra, I need to understand. What else did they build into you? There's no way someone just accidentally made you this powerful. She hesitated, looking away. There was a project, she said softly. Project Seraph. They wanted soldiers who could connect to the energy fields that bind all life. Machines couldn't touch it. Humans couldn't survive it. So they mixed us. Part human for emotion, part alien for control. They thought they could balance the two. Rylan frowned. And you were the result. She nodded slowly. The only one left? Rylan stared at her, realization dawning. They didn't want peace, he said quietly. They wanted gods they could command. Lyra looked up at him, tears gathering in her glowing eyes. I didn't ask to be born, she whispered. I only wanted to feel free once before they erased me. He reached out, touching her cold hand. You are free, he said firmly. As long as I'm breathing, you stay that way. The door behind them blew open. The shockwave threw both of them to the floor. Flames burst through the entrance as armed soldiers poured in. Black armor, crimson visors. Target visual confirmed, a mechanical voice barked. Rylan rolled behind a loader vehicle, firing a short burst that dropped one soldier. Move, he shouted, pulling Lyra toward cover. The air filled with gunfire, bright blue bolts slamming into metal. Sparks rained down, lighting the dark chamber in flashes. Lyra crouched beside him, clutching her head. She could feel the noise, the rage, the commands. The cold voices invading her mind again. Rylan, she gasped. They're inside my thoughts. He grabbed her shoulders, shouting over the chaos. Then push them out. You're stronger than them. Her eyes blazed again, and for a second the entire battlefield stilled. Every soldier paused mid-motion, confused. Their targeting systems flickering, then one screamed. Dropping his weapon as blue light burst from his armor joints, Rylan stared, shocked. You just shorted their suits, Lyra's voice trembled. I can see their energy. I can change it. Then keep changing it, he yelled. She raised her hands, the light spreading like wings from her back. The sound turned into a rising hum that made Rylan's ears ache. Every piece of machinery began to shake. The soldiers opened fire wildly, but their shots bent mid-air, curving away from her like water around stone. Rylan ducked as the light grew blinding, and then, silence again. When the light faded, the soldiers were gone. Only burned armor shells remained, empty and smoking. Rylan looked around in disbelief. You killed them. Lyra shook her head, trembling. No, I sent them away. Far away. Rylan's eyes widened. Where? I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to. Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees, hands shaking violently. Rylan caught her again, lowering her gently to the ground. You saved us, he said softly. That's what matters. Tears glimmered down her cheeks, catching the faint blue light. I can't control it, Rylan. Every time I use it, something dies. He shook his head, gripping her hand tightly. That's not true. You choose what happens. Not them, not their code. You. Lyra stared at him, searching his face for doubt. He met her gaze with quiet certainty, and for the first time since Helion 9, she believed someone above them. Thunder cracked again, engines this time. Not nature, Rylan looked up through the broken roof. A massive dropship hovered above the mine, floodlights sweeping the ruins. Extraction team, he muttered. They won't stop until they have you. Lyra stood shakily, her glow flickering. Then they'll have to take both of us, she said, voice steady now. Rylan smiled despite the fear tightening his chest. That's the spirit. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and looked around the ruined cavern. At the far end, an old cargo lift still flickered with power. He pointed toward it. That leads to the surface. We get there, steal one of their ships, and disappear. Lyra nodded. And if we can't? Rylan met her eyes. Then we make this place their grave. They ran together through smoke and fire. Every few meters, explosions shook the ground. The lift doors slid open with a screech. Revealing the rusted platform inside, Rylan slammed the lever down, and the lift began to rise, groaning under their weight. As the platform climbed, Lyra turned to look down. Through the open gap, she could see dozens of soldiers flooding into the chamber below. They raised their rifles, aiming up. Rylan, she shouted. He ducked as plasma bolts tore through the floor. The lift's cables snapped one by one. "Hold on," he yelled, wrapping his arm around her. The last cable snapped, they fell. But before they hit the ground, everything froze again: time, gravity, sound. Rylan hung weightless in midair, staring in awe. Lyra hovered beside him, eyes burning brighter than before. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "They will never cage me again." With a single gesture, she released the energy building inside her. A column of blue light shot upward, slicing through rock and steel. The mine collapsed in on itself, a blinding storm of power tearing through every tunnel from above. The soldiers saw the ground erupt in a pillar of light that reached toward the sky. Then the world went white. When the light faded, silence fell across Dravos 4. Smoke drifted where the mine once stood, and somewhere beneath the ashes, 2 faint heartbeats echoed, alive but changed forever. Silence fell after the storm of light. No wind, no echo, only drifting ash that glowed faintly blue before fading into darkness. For a long time there was nothing. Then the rubble shifted. A hand broke through the dust, trembling, human, alive. Rylan dragged himself out of the collapsed tunnel, coughing hard. Every muscle burned. His clothes were scorched, his lungs full of smoke. But he was alive. He looked around wildly, heart pounding. "Lyra!" he shouted, voice raw. No answer, only the hiss of settling debris. He stumbled across the shattered ground, searching. The crater stretched for half a mile. Where the mine had stood, there was only a glowing pit of melted stone. He spotted movement near the edge, a faint blue shimmer in the dust. "Lyra!" He ran, falling to his knees beside her. She lay on her side, still breathing, her skin faintly lit like starlight through fog. He turned her gently, brushing dirt from her face. Her eyes opened slowly, weak but aware. "You came back," she whispered. Rylan laughed softly, voice breaking. "Didn't I promise?" She smiled faintly, but he could see she was fading. Her pulse was unsteady, her glow flickering like a candle in the wind. "You used too much power," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I stopped the soldiers," she murmured. "Stopped everything." Rylan looked toward the sky, where smoke curled upward in a thin spiral. There were no ships anymore, no searchlights, no engines, only a few distant stars peeking through the gray clouds. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You did." He pulled a small oxygen canister from his pack and fitted the mask over her mouth. The gauge needle barely moved, almost empty. She took a weak breath, eyes fluttering. "You saved me," she said. Rylan shook his head. "No, Lyra, you saved me. You saved all of us." Her fingers brushed his cheek, cool and trembling. "I feel light," she whispered, "like I'm fading into the air." He gripped her hand, refusing to let go. "Stay with me," he said. "We're getting off this rock. You hear me?" He scanned the horizon. One of the downed ships lay half buried in the sand. Smoke rose from its engines, but the hull looked intact. A transport craft, small, fast, maybe still functional. He stood, lifting her into his arms. She was lighter than before, almost weightless as he carried her. The ground beneath him glowed faintly where her light touched the soil. It felt like carrying a piece of the stars. The wrecked ship's hatch was twisted but still accessible. He kicked it open, coughing as smoke poured out. Inside, everything smelled of burnt circuits and oil. Panels blinked weakly. The core still held power. "Come on, baby," he muttered, setting Lyra down and sliding into the pilot seat. He pressed the ignition sequence, the console flickered. Then a faint hum. One engine sputtered to life. A miracle, he looked back at Lyra. "Hold on," he said. She nodded faintly, whispering, "Fly." The ship shuddered as the thrusters ignited. Dust and ash swirled into a storm around them. Slowly, painfully, the craft lifted from the ground. Rylan kept one hand on the controls and one on Lyra's shoulder. The altitude gauge climbed past 200 meters, then 1,000. Below them, Dravos 4 looked like a graveyard. Quiet, broken, forgotten. The explosions had stopped. But Rylan knew it wouldn't last. If Helion 9 had tracked them once, they'd track again. "Where do we go?" Lyra whispered, eyes half closed. Rylan stared out at the stars. "Anywhere they're not," he said. He scanned the nav display. Most routes were dead. But one faint signal blinked in the outer rim. "Old freight route," he muttered. "Leads to Garrick Station." "We can disappear there," Lyra smiled faintly. "Disappear. Sounds peaceful." "Yeah," he said. "Peaceful sounds nice for a change." The ship broke through the cloud layer, and for the first time since the war, Rylan saw clear sky, black, endless, scattered with millions of stars. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling beside him. Lyra gazed at the stars like a child seeing the world for the first time. "So many lights," she whispered. He nodded. "Everyone a world. Everyone a chance to start over." Her voice grew softer. "Do humans really believe in second chances?" "Some of us have to," he said. "Otherwise we'd never get up again." A faint alarm blinked. "Low power. Fuel at 12%. Rylan sighed. "Figures." Lyra touched the control panel with her fingertips. Blue light rippled from her hand across the console. The warning faded, engine stabilizing. Rylan looked at her in disbelief. "You just recharged it?" She nodded weakly. "I gave it what's left of me." He shook his head. "No, don't do that. We'll find another way." She smiled softly. "You already did. You showed me what life feels like." Before he could answer, a new sound cut through the calm. A deep pulse from the radar. He turned sharply. 3 blips closing fast, Hellion 9 strike craft. "They found us," he muttered, gripping the controls. Lyra looked at the screen, then at him. "They will never stop." Rylan's jaw tightened. "Then we don't run." He flipped the manual switch, powering the ship's external cannons. The engines roared louder as he banked hard toward the approaching ships. Lyra reached for his arm. "You can't fight them all." "Watch me," he said. The first blast hit near the wing, sending alarms screaming. Rylan steadied the craft. Firing back, 2 bursts of plasma cut across the void. One enemy ship exploded, scattering debris into the dark. The other swarmed closer. "Rylan!" Lyra shouted. "Their weapons are locking on." He gritted his teeth. "Then let's give them something they can't lock." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "Can you still do that thing, the light?" Lyra hesitated, trembling. "It could kill me." "Then we make it count," he said. She nodded slowly, understanding, her eyes closed, and the air inside the cockpit began to hum. Blue veins of light crawled across the metal walls. The ship's systems flickered wildly, gauges spinning. The incoming ships drew nearer, weapons charging. Then the entire sky filled with light. From Garrick Station, observers would later describe it as a blue sunrise in the middle of deep space. For one moment, every signal in the sector went dead, then silence. When Rylan opened his eyes, the ship was floating quietly among drifting fragments of metal. The enemy ships were gone and erased from existence. The stars burned brighter, clearer than before. He turned quickly, heart hammering. "Lyra?" She sat slumped against the seat, eyes half open, her glow dim but steady. "I didn't destroy," she whispered. "I sent them somewhere safe, where they can't hurt anyone." Rylan reached for her hand. Holding it tightly, her fingers were cold. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved us again." She looked at him, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "You call me a weapon," she murmured. "But maybe I'm just light trying to learn to be human." Rylan's throat tightened. "You already are." Her eyes fluttered closed. "Rylan, I'm here," he whispered. "Promise me. You'll see the stars for both of us." Before he could speak, her hand went still, the faint glow fading like a dying ember. Rylan sat there in silence, staring at her peaceful face. Outside, the wreckage drifted through the void like falling snow. He wiped the tears from his eyes and reached toward the console. The ship's log still recorded, blinking red. Waiting for input, he pressed the key and spoke softly. "Pilot's log, Rylan Harrow. Mission unknown. Objective changed. Subject Lyra Seraph, rescued from Helion 9. Status, gone but free." He paused. Voice breaking. "If anyone hears this, remember her not as a weapon, but as proof that compassion is stronger than fear." He set the ship on autopilot toward the nearest colony signal. Then he looked once more at Lyra's still form. Her body no longer glowed, yet somehow the cabin felt brighter. He reached over, covering her hand with his. "You're part of the stars now," he whispered. Outside, the endless dark waited. He leaned back in the pilot's seat, eyes heavy, as the ship drifted past the edge of the nebula. The faintest trail of blue light followed behind. A ribbon stretching across the void, marking where one human and one impossible girl had defied the galaxy. Somewhere, deep in the quiet heart of space, the universe recorded that small light and kept it burning. Because stories like theirs never end, they echo. In data streams, in whispers, in dreams. reminding anyone who listens that sometimes the smallest act of mercy can change the shape of all creation.